June 323 BC, the harbor of Babylon. 1,000 warships, full crew, full supplies, ready to sail. Destination, the Arabian coast. 3 days before departure, the man who ordered them built fell ill with fever after a banquet. He was 32. In 12 years, he had conquered more land than anyone before or after him. He had never lost a single battle. He died on the 11th of June. The fleet stayed in the harbor for several weeks. Then the sailors went home. The ships never went anywhere again. Where were they supposed to go? To understand what Babylon meant, you need to understand what India meant. In 326 BC, at the Hyphasis River, in what is now Punjab, a state in northwestern India, Alexander's army stopped. Because they were defeated. Because they refused to go further. 8 years of marching, 60 major battles, and ahead, more battles. Endlessly. Alexander pleaded with his men for 3 days. Ancient Greek historian Arrian, who wrote about those events based on the personal journals of Alexander's generals, tells us that Alexander withdrew to his tent and refused to see anyone. 3 days. His teacher Aristotle had told him the world was finite, that somewhere there was a shore where the earth ended. Alexander believed this. He wanted to stand on that shore. He never got there. When the army turned back, something changed in him. In his last 3 years of life, he became less of a commander and more of an administrator. He reorganized the Persian satrapies. He planned cities. He drilled his fleet. But he also drew up 3 campaigns that would have, had he lived, rewritten the map of the ancient world beyond recognition. Not in the way you might think. The plans are documented. Arrian mentions them. Diodorus of Sicily, another ancient Greek historian and geographer, lists them. First campaign, Arabia. Second, North Africa, specifically Carthage. Third, westward across the entire Mediterranean. Rome is not on these lists, which seems surprising unless you know the context. In 323 BC, Rome was not the empire everyone knows. It was a mid-sized Italian city, looted by the Gauls 67 years earlier, currently losing a war against the Samnites, one of the Italic peoples. The Greek world knew about Rome roughly the way one knows about Gaul, that somewhere up north there is a troubled place. Rome was not a strategic target. The target was Arabia. And the reason tells you everything about how Alexander thought. He was not going west because he wanted more land. He had more land than any administrative system of that era could manage. He was going west because he had understood something that almost no one in the ancient world had understood. Power is not territory. Power is control over what moves between territories. Arabia in 323 BC was the central hub connecting India, Persia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Every medicine that reached a Greek physician had passed through it. Every luxury good that reached Athens had touched Arabian soil. The incense routes, the spice routes, the trade corridors through which the ancient world moved, all of them ran through or around the Arabian Peninsula. One campaign. In the Bible, in the book of Daniel, there is a vision. Chapter 8. A prophet sees a ram standing by a river. Powerful. Nothing can stand against it. It does as it pleases. Then a goat appears from the west, moving, in the text's own words, without touching the ground. It strikes the ram with fury. It breaks its horns. It throws it to the ground and tramples it. The text provides its own interpretation. The ram is the Persian Empire. The goat is the king of Greece. The traditional dating of this text is the 6th century before Christ, approximately 200 years before Alexander was born. In 334 BC, a Macedonian king crossed from Europe into Asia. In 3 years, the Persian Empire ceased to exist. The prophecy was fulfilled precisely. The vision in Daniel does not end with the goat's victory. The great horn, the first king, is broken at the height of his power. His kingdom is divided into 4. This describes what happened after Alexander's death. What if the horn had not broken? Three reconnaissance expeditions had already been sent along the Arabian coast before Alexander's death. We know their routes. We know their reports. The coastline was accessible. The kingdoms of southern Arabia, the Menians, the Sabaeans, the civilizations the Greeks called Arabia Felix, were wealthy, developed, and almost entirely unmilitarized. No single force could organize a defense against a coordinated Macedonian fleet. Alexander's model, refined over 12 years and more than 20 cities, was always the same. Enter, build a city, leave a garrison, create a trade node. From Egypt to Bactria, the same pattern repeated. Arabia would have meant Macedonian merchants, sitting at every key crossroads of world trade, within a single generation, not by military force, by network. The Nabatean traders who controlled the northern Arabian routes had for years successfully resisted Macedonian pressure by one method: disappearing into the desert. Alexander had learned in Central Asia that this kind of resistance could not be broken by cavalry charge. But by that time, Alexander was already a master commander with 12 years of battle experience. By 323 BC, Carthage controlled the Western Mediterranean with a confidence bordering on complacency. Its fleet, the finest in the known world, its trade network from modern Tunisia to Spain to the Atlantic coast of Morocco, its political system, an oligarchic republic that had been refining itself for 3 centuries. Here is the honest tactical assessment. A Macedonian phalanx on North African soil, supplied through the Mediterranean, against a Carthaginian navy that knew every current and every harbor in the Western Sea. This is not an automatic Macedonian victory. This was, in fact, the first genuinely uncertain problem in Alexander's entire career. Every opponent he had ever faced was ultimately solvable by the same method. Find the main force, fix it, break through the gap. Their king flees or dies. The army collapses. Carthage had no king. It was governed by suffets, elected magistrates, managed in a council of merchant families. You cannot end a republic by killing one man. Alexander knew this. He had watched Greek city-states reconstitute themselves after he executed their leadership. This would have been a different kind of war. Let us be precise about what Rome was in 323 BC. Population, approximately 150,000 people. Military record, losing a war against the Samnites. In 2 years, its army would surrender and be marched under the yoke at the Caudine Forks. International reputation, 0. When Pyrrhus of Epirus, a king trained in the Macedonian tradition, from a state incomparably smaller than Alexander's, arrived in Italy in 280 BC with a phalanx and war elephants. He won every tactical engagement and still could not end the war. After the Battle of Asculum, he said, "Another such victory, and I am undone." This tells us that Macedonian tactics against Rome produced ambiguous victories, not decisive collapses. Rome absorbed battlefield defeats the way no other civilization of its era could. It was built on manpower depth, on civic identity, and on the remarkable Roman conviction that losing a battle was not a reason to negotiate. Alexander would have taken Rome. Militarily, the arithmetic was not in Rome's favor. The question is what would have happened next. Because Rome's real defense was never its legions. It was its idea of itself. 400 years of civic ritual, constitutional law, ancestral custom embedded so deeply, it functioned almost like biology. Alexander had already encountered this. In Greece, he destroyed Thebes, physically, completely, and the city-states fell into line. But they never stopped thinking of themselves as culturally superior to their Macedonian ruler. Roman aristocrats under Macedonian occupation would have been the same as Thebes, multiplied by 10. The military conquest could have happened in a single campaign season. The occupation could have lasted the rest of his entire life. He was 32. He could have had 50 more years. Whether that would have been enough, no one who has ever occupied a republic that believed in itself has managed it permanently. Not one.
On all imported goods? Yes, effective with.
If Alexander had lived past 323 BC, his generals would not have divided the empire. The Wars of the Diadochi, 40 years of Macedonians killing Macedonians across the eastern Mediterranean, would not have happened. 40 years of resources not burned in war, cities not sacked, people not killed. The Library of Alexandria was founded by Ptolemy I, one of Alexander's generals, around 295 BC. By ancient estimates, at its height it held between 400,000 and 700,000 scrolls. We do not know what was in all of them. We know something about some of them. Aristarchus of Samos proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system around 270 BC. Copernicus proposed the same model in 1543 AD. 18 centuries later, Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth around 240 BC. Margin of error under 3%. This calculation was lost. In 1900 of the Christian era, a sponge diver discovered a shipwreck near the island of Antikythera. Among the cargo, a bronze mechanism dated to approximately 100 BC. It could calculate planetary positions and predict astronomical events decades in advance. The complexity of its gear trains was not matched by European engineering until the 14th century AD. Someone designed that. We do not have their notes. We do not know their name. In the 1st century of the Christian era, in Alexandria, a man named Hero created a working steam engine. He called it an Aeolipile. It was used as a toy, a temple curiosity. No one asked, what if we made it larger? James Watt invented the next steam engine in 1776. 17 centuries after Hero. The world in 200 BC could have looked entirely different if science under Alexander's rule had been funded and developed, instead of being interrupted by 40 years of wars between men who cared about thrones, not libraries. June 11th, 323 BC. Fever, palace in Babylon, a man who was 32. The generals gathered at his bedside and asked who would inherit the empire. Arrian records his answer as, "To the strongest." Some historians believe he was already too weak to speak clearly, that what was heard was not what was said. It doesn't matter. What followed was 40 years of wars between the strongest. The ships in the harbor rotted. The plans in the archives were never carried out. And in a quiet room in Alexandria, Hero of Alexandria looked at a bronze sphere spinning above a flame, called it a curiosity, and moved on to other things. Because there was no one to ask him to stay with it. Because the library that would have kept his work was already becoming something that could be lost. What we lost when Alexander died was not an empire. Empires end. What we lost was the room where someone was already working on the next thing, and we didn't get back into that room for 1,700 years.